The stone, once rejected, appeared to find its way back into the foundation. For the first time since November last year, the NTV team finally stepped foot into Parliament after months of being locked out when the entire Nation Media Group was expelled from accessing the August House. But the return came not through an official clearance. Instead, it took the personal intervention of Aringa South legislator Alioni Yok Odria, who walked to the gate himself, picked up the stranded NTV crew and escorted them into Parliament buildings after security temporarily denied them entry once again.
Since November, NTV was censored. Why? Today, officially, I have brought in myself, NTV. You're most welcome. From the gate, nobody should block you. I found the police had blocked you. The 11th Parliament, where Anita Among had the powers, has been dissolved. There is no press censorship here. The press, you have to report A as A, B as B.
The moment carried an almost poetic irony inside corridors now overshadowed by corruption investigations hanging over outgoing Speaker Anita Annet Among. For some legislators long branded as noisy anti-corruption crusaders, the spectacle felt less like a media access story and more like the opening scene of political karma, finally knocking at Parliament's door. To Odria, the unfolding probe must not end with Among alone. He argues that the rot within Parliament was deeply institutionalized and stretched far beyond the Speaker's office.
We need to clean up this Parliament. The 12th Parliament should be a different Parliament for this country. We want the clerk to Parliament to be checked, to be investigated, none other than Adolf. We're also calling for the office of Director Finance of Parliament, who has been the only coordinator of Anita Among in the entire system. Director Finance, Mr. Onobwa of Parliament's office must be checked. We are calling for Office of Director Communications, Chris Obore of Parliament, to be checked against corruption. We are calling for Department of HR of Parliament to be checked. The leadership of Anita Among employed over 500 staff illegally here without any job advert, either in the newspapers or internally.
Nakawa West legislator Joel Senyonyi accused the outgoing Speaker of allegedly turning Parliament into a personal enterprise where public resources served private interests, from businesses to luxurious personal projects, while ordinary Ugandans continued grappling with economic hardships outside the gates of the same institution.
You cannot be misusing taxpayer money like this. You know that you're buying generators. They bought generators for her office, for her home and the home, not office. Generator for herself and the Deputy Speaker, each nearly about 300 million shillings for their private homes. How does that make sense? An electric fence was constructed at her private home in Bukedia. About 600 million shillings. That's a private home. How does that make sense? She awarded her radio station in Bukedia a contract worth 3.1 billion shillings. Apparently to run adverts of Parliament and all of these different things. And I said, was there bidding by other media houses so that we get the most qualified, the one with the biggest coverage and all of those different things? There was none. The people who signed on the contract were staff in her office, signing off as managers. And many other ridiculous things, that billions of shillings were being put on accounts of staff of Parliament. Chris Obore, 4 I don't know how many billion shillings, and all these others. They would go, withdraw, and then take to her home. There's no way these things can be right. And whenever we talked about these issues, people were saying, you, Joel, you hate the speaker, and so on. I said, look, there's no reason anyway I must have to like her. But whether I hate her or not, the issues of concern are here. Why are they not being responded to?
Senyonyi, never one to mince his words, suggested that the corruption allegation may only be part of a larger political chessboard. Beyond theft, Senyonyi hinted that Among's growing political ambitions may have unsettled powerful forces within the country's ruling establishment, triggering what he described as a silent effort by the Trinity of Power to politically tame her before those ambitions grew further.
The other offense, aside from being a thief, Anita Among, her other offense is she has been developing ambitions to run for president. And that's been clear to all and sundry. So they decided to use her theft to say, okay, now that we have a charge against her, let's deal with her once and for all. But otherwise, it's not really the fight against corruption. Otherwise, this whole government, all government officials would all be in jail. Parliament passes, and something we're always quarreling about, trillions of shillings worth of classified. That classified budget is what is used by Mr. Museveni and his son. They're the ones who control it. It's not audited. They do with it as they please. That's also corruption. Mr. Museveni said, no, these ones I have forgiven them. How do you forgive some and not others? How do you choose? Because it should be court to determine eventually. But people were taken to court by the Inspectorate of Government, these MPs that were extorting billions of money from government entities. And then he said, now these ones I forgave. So that shows you that this really is not just a fight against corruption. So people should not get overly excited.
The past 5 years of this House, under the leadership of now outgoing Speaker Anita Annet Among, were repeatedly branded by critics as an era of deals behind the doors. A parliament accused of lavish spending, corruption allegations, and unchecked financial indiscipline. And as the old saying warns that every action eventually meets its consequence, the once energetic and untouchable 11th Parliament now exists under a cloud of investigations, with its former headliner herself facing mounting scrutiny over corruption claims. Today, the corridors of a house that once roared with political confidence appear unusually subdued, almost as though the weight of public anger finally caught up with the institution. Whether the incoming 12th Parliament restores public trust or simply inherits the same script with a new cast remains a question hanging over in the chamber. David Ijo, NTV, at Parliament.